All right, we're back for another episode of the Mortgage Show, last one of the year. Beds, how you doing? Oh, you're fired up.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready. Old school Brady's running down the field right now.
Yep, yelling at the crowd, getting
Oh,
everyone fired up.
remember that?
Yeah, it was a good run.
It was a good one. It was a great run.
Amazing run. So that means you're ready to go, though. This is our last episode of the year. The year's winding down. It's December 18th right now. Just got a couple more weeks to go. Got all the holidays ahead of us. I wanted to talk a little bit about this past year. It's been a crazy year for us in particular. Talk about some of the highlights, some of the things that we're thankful for. Where do you want to start?
I was thinking about this earlier relationships. I was thinking about it. January to this conversation, what has changed? And I would say relationships. It's between the networking stuff, some of the outside groups that I do now. It's been fun to be more involved and more engaged, sort of reinvigorated. Things changed for me that way. Um, I like that. I mean, I'm just sort of thankful for the newer energy level. How about you?
A lot of the same things. I think we're both involved in a lot of things. And I want you to talk about like what are the main things that you're involved in now? Because you had some recent additions, you obviously got some networking, but I'd be interested in having you share that with the people that listen. I can do the same, but what's going on for you in terms of those relationships, things that you're involved in?
I just think like meetings and like reaching out to people, having the confidence to do that. The networking thing it's been interesting because it's like it's a different year where you have a higher interest rate environment. So like a big portion of like my networking stuff has been referring out where not a lot is coming to me because of the
Yep.
higher rate environment. I mean, people are always like referring me, or alluding to, my cousin or somebody wants to buy, we'll have a conversation eventually. But right now, it's not really like a high refer a loan officer type environment. So
Yep.
it's like those relationships. I sat in the room today in our meeting and I was just like, I would really just call all these people my friends.
Yep.
So that's
And hey,
been,
just so we're clear, this
yeah,
is TBD Connections. This is the networking group that meets weekly that you're a part of. You host it at our office.
yeah. We put a lot of effort into our office.
Mhm.
Like every day I walk in here, I'm super proud of how it looks. When we did the conference room, I just never envisioned it being so full. And it's
Yep.
neat to see a full room of people where you're like, damn, I wish this place was bigger. And
I know.
it's a pretty decent sized conference room. Um, I I find myself like I joined the Rotary. I
Yep.
just recently became a Rotarian.
Congrats.
Thank you. The service above self scenario. That's big. So
Yep.
in the past, between fundraising for field hockey and Project Sunrise,
Hmm.
and then getting involved with some of the Thanksgiving meal stuff over the years. I liked being the point person, but I realized in certain areas, as efficient as I am, I'm very inefficient in certain areas. And I think being the point person really sort of exposes some of those for me as I'm
Yep.
growing comfortable doing these type of things. So with the Rotary thing, I think becoming part of a bigger group is what is very enticing for me,
Hmm.
considering that work. So being part of something. So yeah, that's some of the stuff for me.
Um, I think being a Rotarian is an awesome thing. You might not remember, or you probably should. I was in Rotary for 10 years, a
Yeah,
different chapter. So you do Saco Bay Rotary, which meets Thursday mornings, I think 7:15, 7:30 at
7:30.
Birdie's.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I used to be involved in the one that was lunchtime on Wednesdays at Run of the Mill and other places too. But I mean, at least in my chapter, I'm sure in the chapter that you're a part of now, it's just a lot of business owners, a lot of
yeah.
people that care about the community, people that you want to know. So it's great to help your community and all those that are around you, but it's also good for business too and the relationships that you build. So I mean, I think it's a win-win all across the board for that stuff.
I want to ask you Jesus, I just stumbled all upon
You
that.
got nervous, man. It's no big deal.
I got nervous. Sometimes I get really nervous. I mean, I look at you, you look so much better than me. I'm like, this guy wants to talk to me. I think, don't cut that out.
Not
Um, this is us at our core, by the way, guys. The perspective of, or I wanted to ask you, when did you become comfortable being uncomfortable? It took me a while. It took me a while.
in these rooms with dozens, 50 people, and times that you have to stand up and talk and put
Yeah.
yourself in front of people. It's weird. I don't think personally, I'm actually very introverted. I don't know if you would peg me as that, but like it takes a lot for me to like get out, be around a lot of people. I think I do it pretty well, but like my default position is being at home by myself, just
Yeah.
like recharging the batteries. So it has gotten easier over the years, but it's not something that's like second nature for me. So I think it just takes reps, dude. Reps.
I think the fun part of it now is like thinking about what you were gonna say was just such an anxiety ridden thing. Now it's like it's almost like I'm in sleep mode, and when it's my turn, it's like time to turn it on, Chris.
Yep.
And I think that's what's been great this year for me, where it's like there's not a lot of anxiety anymore, which is great.
Yep. That's nice. Yeah. That's good,
Yep.
man. You put enough hours into all that stuff now that's what it becomes. And I think the same is for me too.
And you have been my motivation in that area, just so you know.
In terms of the networking stuff or just putting yourself out there.
Both.
Yeah.
Yep.
As far as this year goes for me, I would say it's been cool to see relationships solidify through our transition to CMG. I think a lot of people that I know personally, professionally, have been really supportive of that change.
Yep.
And that change has allowed me to reconnect with people or deepen relationships. Always been big into networking. So you do your TBD on Wednesdays. I do my BNI Rising Guide also on Wednesday mornings at Run of the Mill. And like you said, the group that you're with are like friends and family for you. The same thing for me. So that's been amazing. Besides that, I'm involved in the school committee in Biddeford, which takes up a lot of time. You talk about putting yourself out in front of people and you're not sure what you're going to say. I mean, that's a perfect example. You're in front of city officials, school officials, the general public every couple weeks, and it can be a little bit anxiety ridden, but you grow through that. So that's something that's helped in put me in front of the community. Same for like Little League softball. Been really involved in that. We put a lot of effort into that this year and making big progress. So it's been kind of cool to see like the things that are important to me in my life and business kind of mend together. And I think when you're in the type of job that we're in a community, all that stuff helps, you know?
Do you have, I don't know if you're going to tap dance around this question. I think as I get older, I have political aspirations, but I realize that I have a lot to learn in a very, and I think in multiple areas, but I'm trying.
Mhm.
I'm going to hop in someday.
Mhm.
When I will, I don't know,
Yeah.
but I'm going to.
That's interesting.
When is Randy?
I'm out. I'm out.
Um,
Out on politics.
what if it was a local scenario? What if it was a comfortable local scenario where it made sense?
I'm just out on it altogether. It's been interesting because I really enjoy being part of the school committee,
Yep.
and that's like the lighter level of politics.
Mhm.
And I don't know when I'll be done that, but I used to aspire to city council, running for mayor, as crazy as that sounds to say, believe it or not, like
It
state
does.
politics and all that stuff. But I don't know, man. I don't know that it's for me now that I've kind of see how it works behind the scenes.
Okay.
I feel like I need to make my life smaller, focus on my family. This might change in 10 years when my kids are out of school and
Yeah.
stuff, but like, right now, I just can't see doing any of that stuff.
And the reason why I ask you this, yeah, I love the dog in the background.
Can you hear that? That's insane.
That's awesome. That's high energy, dog.
That's just no big deal. Someone walking by the house and her losing her mind.
And it's like, it's not going to be a political rabbit hole here. These are all random thoughts, I know, but
I would love to see Mayor Beds someday or City Councilor Beds.
there's a lot of work that I need to do.
But no,
Good
that'd be
question.
cool.
Hey, good question, right? Because full disclosure, you just gave me a compliment. I could see you being the mayor of Biddeford.
You could.
I could.
You want to talk about? Well, I mean, is there anything else you want to mention about the year, like about 2024, before we wrap it up and move on to other things? Like, was it a
Um,
good year, average year, business wise? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think number wise, I like where it was. Relationship wise, my relationships are up, which I think eventually will turn into larger numbers. I'm so
Yep.
proud of that.
Yeah.
Um, Dude, I don't know. I feel more comfortable coming in here every day, and I'm like in a good headspace to crush.
Yeah. So I'm ready for 2025 myself. What are your thoughts on what the year ahead looks like? Is there anything
Whew.
product wise, the industry wise, anything comes to mind when you say that? I have some thoughts, but I'd just be interested if anything comes to mind for you.
Yeah, I think we're still going to be leaning in the seller market area, but I think it's softened enough where it's going to bring it back a little bit to the buyers.
Mhm.
I think there's going to be some downward pressure on interest rates, which I mean, you can sense this, but I feel like there's a little less of a buyer pool right
Mhm.
now. Ultimately, it's going to sway it back to the buyers because there's less demand, that whole supply and demand scenario. But I I like buyers in 2025. I think it's still going to be strong for sellers. I think we're going to have a little bit lower and stable interest rate environment. I feel
Mhm.
like it's going to feel quote unquote normal for us and for real estate agents. And I think normal for real estate agents is probably getting used to inventory sitting for 30 to 45 days.
Yeah, which should be really nice. So a
Yeah.
couple things that you said. If the pendulum swung a little bit back towards buyers, what I could see that meaning, and I'm seeing it now, is that buyers aren't going to be forced into conventional financing like they have been over the past few years.
Yep.
For the past few years, just to give some context to that, is basically if you wanted to buy a home that's financed, you had to find a way to contort your personal finances into a situation where you could qualify for conventional financing. That typically means that you have a good credit score, somewhat of a decent down payment, and that's what sellers were looking for, because if you had a government type loan, they'd kind of push that to the side. Over the past few months, I've seen more FHA offers be accepted, more main state housing offers be accepted, RD. So my hope is that with it being a little bit more of a buyer's market, the borrowers that really should be doing that type of financing to begin with aren't forcing themselves into this conventional bucket that they don't belong in. I'd be very encouraged for them if that was how it was in 2025. And that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Number one, great use of contort. Number two, getting more Govy loans is definitely a better scenario for
For a lot
buyers.
of people, if you
For
have a 60 credit score, you probably should be doing a government loan. The pricing for conventional financing isn't great for a credit score in that range. If you have a minimal down payment, you might not even get an approve in the system to even move forward with that. So it's like a lot of times that's a government loan type borrower. And in the past, it would be a no brainer. But for the past couple of years, it's like, how do we make these people do a conventional loan when it's probably not the right product for them?
It'll be interesting too, like the shift for real estate agents when they're doing their listing presentations, if they're part of a cluster of other agents that are sort of competing for that. Like, what does the presentation look like for them, sort
Mm-hmm.
of teaching or coaching along sellers that actually, that they're obviously going to think their house is up here wise, but now it's sort of a little bit more of a, you got to be a little bit in an area of push pull here. You got to kind of be a little bit more realistic. Like it's going to be interesting this year.
I think that's a challenge for realtors. I mean, I
Yeah,
know it is now, and it's going to be next year as well. Like, people are going to think their home is still worth probably more than it is, or they'll reach for it and see what happens. And agents are going to have to decide if they want to take on those listings at prices they think are very unrealistic,
yeah,
or not. You know, you can see, agents that take high listings. I mean, there's people that build reputations that way, and there's other people that don't would rather not waste the time and the money that's involved in listing a property that is not even close to what it's going to sell at.
yep, yeah. It's going to be interesting. It's like, are those type of agents going to get pushed out?
Want to talk about interest rates for a sec?
Yeah, let's do it.
So we are 10, 15 minutes away from an announcement on what the Federal Reserve is doing with the Fed funds rate. Nothing
Yep,
might be out yet, but the expectation is that they're going to cut rates by 25 basis points.
yep,
And this is a good reminder for anyone listening that that is not mortgage rates that they're cutting. This is the Fed funds rate, the rate that banks borrow money between each other. Might affect car loan rates, CD rates, credit card rates, things like that, but it doesn't affect mortgage rates in the way that most people think. So what do you think happens with mortgage rates if the Federal Reserve cuts the Fed's fund rate by 25 basis points?
the not the effect that we want for whatever reason. Well, actually, historically, whenever the Fed does cut this rate, there's a little bit of a lag time before it provides rate relief for the longer term notes, the mortgage notes. I'm looking at mortgage backed securities right now. When we started this conversation, we were up 13 basis points. It is after 2 o'clock, so the Fed started the minutes, so the Fed speak at 2. It just reversed by 36 basis points, so we're down 22 basis points. So my
That's not
guess
good.
is I would guess that they're probably doing a quarter, but there's some language in there right now that's like speaks on both sides of their mouth where
The
it's
language is probably something along the lines of, inflation's still above the target, jobs market's still strong. We're not going to be cutting rates in the immediate future again. We'll see how things play out over the next 3 or 4 months, and maybe by the second quarter or something like that, they'll revisit cutting the Fed funds rate, and that's probably why the market's reacting the way it is. But it's definitely not great news, although I'm conditioned for it at this point.
I'm reading everywhere that rates, best case scenario, low sixes this
Mhm.
coming year. So you and I would love them to be in the mid fives. We'll see what happens, but it's gonna take a pile of bad economic news to get us there.
It really will. I do see this thing. Morgan Stanley predicting the 10-year Treasury could drop to 3.5 to 3.75 by the end of 2025. And if you remember our conversation with Uncle Tony from last month, mortgage
Yep.
rates are usually about 2% higher than that
Yeah.
number. So if we're at 3.5 to 3.75 on the 10-year Treasury, you could maybe hope that rates would be in the 5.5 to 6% range by the end of next year.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are holding out hope that that was what rates were going to be in the first quarter of 2025. It just doesn't look like it's happening. Rates are in the upper sixes, low sevens in different situations as of right now. Again, with not much relief coming today from the Federal Reserve.
So the 10-year treasury is at 4.45, up 7 basis points. Uncle Tony's 2% scenario. So yeah, we're sitting right where we should be.
Mhm.
Um, we did pierce below the 200-day moving average, which I don't like.
Yep.
That's a major moving average. Typically, if you can trade above that, there's some stability in interest rates. We're below it right now. We'll see what happens by the end of the day. But I would like ultimately for our peace of mind if we could sit around the 200-day moving average and we'll have stable interest rates. But I mean,
Yep.
right now we're in a weird area.
Yeah. Recommendations that we see on our end are to lock rates right now,
Yeah.
in fear of them
Yep.
getting worse. So that's something we're always trying to navigate. Prediction wise, though, I mean, there is some relief on the horizon, whether it's 6, 12, 18 months from now, although we've been saying that since 2022. That's my hope for the end of next year. It does make me wonder if arms become something that's more attractive. Arms are not something that we do a lot of in our business, mostly a local bank product, to be completely honest with people. But I do read that arms could be something that becomes hot again in 2025. So,
Yeah, I agree with that. It's always like every time you look at a transaction, it's like what makes sense short and long term, what's your projections? One of the things that I wanted to bring up is I think in 2025, we're going to have a lot of debt consolidation scenarios. I
mhm.
think we're sort of in that area for the cycles that I've seen now after I'm in year 22 now doing this, which is freaking me out now.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I mean, we go from a low interest rate environment to high appreciation to higher interest rates to people not doing anything. They're using alternative sources to rack up debt to eventually looking at a mortgage to debt consolidate. And I think we're starting to hit that area in 2025.
Yeah. Well, people certainly have plenty of equity to do that. So whether or not we tap into a home equity loan to do that, or just a full blown cash out refinance, that's things that I'm sure we'll be looking at for people in 2025. One thing that I thought was interesting that I've been reading a lot about or hearing a lot about is the implementation of AI or artificial intelligence in our industry.
Yes.
And it'll be interesting to see how that plays itself out because it's becoming a bigger and bigger part of the world. I mean, honestly, we're probably not even going to be doing mortgages in 5 years. It'll just be a freaking computer program. But I did hear this use of AI to scrub borrowers' income and asset documentation.
Oh, interesting.
Lenders implementing that, not necessarily CMG, and I'm sure that sort of stuff is on the horizon, but I've just heard of lenders taking AI, using that to analyze income, assets, and come up with a income calculation or just usable assets for a transaction, and reduces some of the steps that loan officers have to do and some of the ops people that are needed. So it'll be interesting to see in 2025 how that sort of stuff gets implemented industry wide, CMG wide. or wise, I should say, because that stuff's coming. Whether it's 2025, 2026, at some point that's going to have a bigger and bigger role in the transactions.
Okay, AI replaces Randy Force here. What does he do for a full-time job? Shotgun. Give me something.
Oh God, if I'm being honest with you, man, I would like to be a teacher. It's
Okay.
a weird thing to say.
No.
If I think of my default jobs, okay, not doing mortgages, AI replaces me. Like, I'd like to help kids out. You know, if I'm being
Yeah.
completely honest, teacher coach scenario would be a lot of fun. What about Chris Bedard
Starting quarterback.
for flag football? I mean, hey man, you can do flag football. They still play at Laurel Hill Cemetery on weekends. That could be starting quarterback scenario for you.
That would be my dream job. I'm dead serious. Controlling the line of scrimmage, reading the defense, executing plays, scoring points, having the crowd root for you. I'm in. Sign me up. But I'm 46 years old. I'm not in shape anymore. So I would probably get myself a trailer. I would fill it with all kinds of carpentry tools, and I would just do jobs at my leisure.
Love it.
Yep.
So hey, these could be real scenarios in 5 years.
We'll see what
But
happens.
I do think it starts to factor into the mortgage industry though at some point in 2025. It
Yep.
just seems like it's creeping up everywhere else. So, okay, that's just some thoughts on the upcoming year. Anything else you want to add for that before we talk some mortgage stuff and wrap it up?
If my kids listen to this someday, I'm proud of you. Haley's a junior in college. She's killing it. She's working full time. Her grades are amazing. Mason's going to graduate in a few months. I'm proud of him
That's
also.
that's
Um,
insane.
yeah, it's just really crazy. I navigating the world without your kids needing you at this age is really interesting. How about
Yeah.
you?
I don't know how much I've talked about it on this podcast in particular, but my three daughters are 7, 10, and 12. And that's a whole wide range of different things going on in their life with activities and social stuff and the ups and downs of raising kids. It's fun right now, man. I'm hoping for a great year for them in 2025. I really am, but no issues at this point. Just doing the parenting thing.
You wait until the day where you look at them and you're like, wow, they're my equal. That's
Yeah.
where I'm at.
Yeah.
They don't need us anymore, other than paying for college.
Yeah. I sometimes think of that with Aubrey, my oldest. She's only 12, but
It's
Jesus.
coming.
Yeah. It's definitely getting there, dude. But yeah, it'll be a great year for all that stuff. A couple mortgage things to share,
Yeah,
if you're
let's
cool
do
with a
it.
couple things. Conventional loan limit is something people should be aware of. That's now $806,000. Anything above that would be a jumbo loan, 20% down. It's kind of a different ball game, but anything $806,000 or less in Southern Maine, conventional loan, you could do as little as 3% down. So, do you remember when that was $417,000? It wasn't that
2000,
long.
2004. I think it was 327,500 when I started at the tail end of 2003.
Hmm.
Then it went to the number that you just said.
But it was
I
that number for a long time.
forever.
It might have been 417 6 years ago, and then it started creeping up, and now it's just freaking exponential at this point. Every year it goes up by a bunch. I think last year was 755, and now it's 806, and it's going to keep going.
To the powers that be, if you're watching this, knock it off with a jumbo loan limit and a conventional loan limit. Nobody cares anymore. Just just give us a max loan amount that you're willing to let us do.
Just 2 million
Like,
bucks. Come on.
yeah, I mean, it's getting so annoying. It's like the secondary mortgage market. We have to set this level of where jumbo is, where conventional is, while we get our tails kicked by banks on jumbo loans. It's like,
Mhm.
knock it off. Just let us have our cake and eat it too.
For once.
For once.
God.
God
Um,
damn it.
wanted to share that. I had an interesting issue in the past couple weeks with a borrower that said they had a certain work situation.
Yep.
And come to find out as we move through the process, they actually don't work at this place that they said they did full time. They are working there through a temp agency. And this is just one of a number of jobs that they've had in the past 2 years. I think like 4 or 5 different jobs. And it was a good learning for me because I haven't worked with a lot of people in that situation, if I'm being completely honest. And there's a bunch of nuance around what's usable for income. But basically, if they have a 2 year history of working at temp agencies, you basically have to get all the verifications from each one of those temp agencies, and then you average the income over that 2 year period of time, and that's what their usable income is. As opposed to if someone worked at, let's say, Pratt and Whitney, and they get paid X dollars an hour, 40 hours a week. You just do the math, and that's what it is. If you were at Pratt & Whitney as a temp worker, it doesn't matter what your hourly rate is and how many hours a week you work. All it matters is what you've earned over the past couple of years and doing an average. So it's a little bit different. It isn't a deal killer if someone works for temp agencies, which, if you're listening to this as a real estate agent, you might be concerned if you do hear that your buyer works at a temp agency. But it was just a learning for me that that's how you do it. It wasn't the funnest.
It wasn't
Surprise.
the funnest. I've been through that before. I've also been through a similar scenarios with like seasonal workers or outdoors workers that kind of park it for a few months when it gets super cold. If there's a history of doing that for over 2 years, you're averaging paces with those gaps, so it can be done. So, I mean, this is big in the Northeast, even though the last couple of years winters have been mild. But yeah, that's a similar thing that I've run into.
In this case of the temp workers, I see it's seems to be a thing with new Americans, people that have come seeking asylum from other countries. They just don't have full-time employment at this point, so they just get placed by a temp agency, and then that kind of revolves. It doesn't mean that, again, they can't get a loan, but it's just something that to know, to plan for right from the beginning, to ask those questions, not be caught off guard with it like I was. The person, to me, positioned that they worked at a certain place, 40 hours a week, made this certain amount of money. They actually made it seem like they worked there for a longer period of time, but what they ultimately meant was they worked with a staffing agency for that amount of time, but had only been placed at this place for the past 3 months. And it really did change everything that they could qualify for a little bit for the worse. So I think it was just a learning to ask those sort of questions, and sometimes you don't know those situations till you've been through them.
Which is a good segue to pre-qual versus pre-approval.
Yeah. I think for 2025, it's going to continue to be a focus for me to do pre-approvals when it makes sense. Pre-approval versus a pre-qualification. A lot of times people think those are the exact same thing, but they are a lot different. Did you want to explain what they were real quick, and then we can wrap it up?
Yeah, a lot of times if we're taking in a pretty vanilla borrower, W-2, no gaps, 2 years of work history, you see the income, it's really simple. You're going to do the pre-qual scenario because it's like we're acting as an underwriter at that point because it's like entry level, easy to figure that calculation out and give the pre-qual amounts. If you do have something like Randy just mentioned, like the seasonal worker I mentioned, or maybe you have somebody that's just small base in heavily tip related, you're going to grind with that. You're going to do the pre-approval, which means collecting all the income docs, verifying the information with the employer, where the employer fills out a written verification of employment. We're going to package that all up. We're going to send it into underwriting based on a max pre-approval amount that we think all of this equals. And then we're going to let the underwriter tell us, loan officer, are you right? Or no, you're not right. Here's the actual pre-approval amount, and here's how the income averages. So that's a big difference. Pre-qual to pre-approval. Pre-approval's next level.
For sure. And a lot of times pre-qualification is fine. You have someone that's worked the same job for a while. They have a bunch of money in the bank. Credit's good. It's all very straightforward. You think they're buying a house for much less than what they actually could buy if they maxed themselves out. Pre-qual is going to be sufficient in that case. But in the case of a temp worker or something where their credit score is a little bit on the fringe, or they're basically maxing out what you think that they could afford, get some underwriter eyes on that. Make sure that there's nothing that you're missing. Have them do the calculations, verify, so that you can go in there and just know that everything's going to be okay. And plus, it's nice to be able to position that to the listing agent when you're making an offer, to let them know that everything's been reviewed by underwriting. That could be a deal breaker in the favor of your customer if you're competing against another offer.
Love it.
So keep that in mind. We're going to do a lot of that in 2025, and a lot of things to look forward to, man. So this is it.
We're on to 2025.
On to 2025. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate anyone that's still sticking this out after 31 minutes. But we have fun doing this, so hopefully you guys enjoyed it a little bit, and we'll be back again next month.
Have a good Christmas. Have a happy New Year. We'll see you in 2025. Let's go.
I thought you were going to sing. I thought you were just about to sing a song. That's how it sounded like you were going down that path. So
I felt silky. I was almost there, and I'm like, no, don't do it, Chris.
Don't do it. Well, all right, next month. All right, bud. Talk soon.
Thanks, guys.
Happy holidays.